Today's tutorial is for a designer that I just found, Sew Fabulous Fabrics, and we're sewing up a pattern today that completely just blew my mind. This pattern is like when you're reading one of those thriller mystery books and you're all along the book trying to guess who did it, what twist is coming next, and when the big reveal comes, you had no clue that that was what it was going to be. We are making the adjustable bottle sling, and honestly, I could not guess what step was coming next or the steps we were doing, how they were going to relate to each other. Typically, when I make a pattern for the first time, I can kind of figure out where it's going. I'll be like, okay, yeah, it's going to be this way, or it's going to do this next. And it's kind of predictable. But just like that surprise ending in a mystery book, even up into the last step, I did not know what was happening with this pattern. It was definitely a fun ride. So this is only my second one I'm making, and I'm very excited to see how I can manage it, because the first one, every single step, I was like, wait, what is she wanting me to do? And how is this going to relate to the rest of the pattern? A very fun ride. So let me show you what we're making today. We are making this bottle sling. Is this not the cutest thing ever? It really caught me off guard. I thought it was a very unique pattern, but when I sew it, I was like, wow, that's so unique. We are using Velcro, as you can see. So it's adjustable in the fact that if your bottle is bigger or smaller, you can make it fit. Now in my tutorial, I'm not making the strap because it's just going to be a basic strap. You can use webbing, or the pattern has the measurements if you want to use fabric to make your strap. So now what we're going to do is just talk a little bit about this pattern. So this piece right here with the Velcro on it is going to be this piece here. This is your exterior side of it, but you will have a lining too. I made this version and I'm making this version too, all the same prints. So the exterior and the lining are all the same. Definitely if you wanted to do some contrasting prints, I think it'd be super cute, but I also think it is really cute all in one print. This outer portion here is the outer sling portion. Your outer pieces are bigger than your lining pieces. You can look at that and see there is the difference in the two. Outer, liner. So let's look at each of those individually. For the outer, you're going to cut 4 pieces. For the inner, you're going to cut 4 pieces. On both your outer and your inner, the pattern tells you to interface 2 of those. I chose to use a Royal Pixie Light, but if you're someone who likes to use SF101, you can use that, or any other medium weight interfacing equivalent that you like to use. I'm going to have 2 D-rings that I'm going to attach, and these are 3/4 of an inch D-rings. These pieces here, it's called your wrap, and so you're going to have 2 pieces, an exterior and a lining. I'm going to show you what they look like. I'm not adding any interfacing to these pieces, but I did go ahead and just glue on my Velcro. On the lining side, you put the 2 hook pieces. Now the hook pieces are your rougher or bumpier pieces. They're not the softer piece. The pattern tells you how far to go from this side, how far to go from this side, and you attach them. Mine is not the type that has the adhesive on the back. I do not like Velcro that has the adhesive on the back because it gums up my needle. I get skipped stitches. I can barely sew it. So I'm definitely using the part without the adhesive. Because of that, I went ahead and used some of my glue. I use this Beacon 3-in-1 glue. If you don't like to use glue in your sewing room, you could use double-sided tape, of course. Once you have the hook side on the lining, you'll go ahead and add the loop side, which is the softer side, to your exterior. The hook and the loop are going to go on the same measurement, but they're going to be on opposite sides. So if your print's directional, you're going to sew it like this, because in the end, it needs to be able to wrap around to meet each other. So that is how you'll do those pieces. I also cut out a piece of fleece, but you could use batting. I think the pattern actually calls for batting. My fleece is not fusible, so I'll just attach it, and I'll show you how we attach that. Since this is just glued on, I will have to sew around the perimeter. I'm going to use a black thread. I want those stitches to be as non-noticeable as possible. And I'll just stitch around the perimeter just about an 1/8, 16th inch away. When you look at your Velcro, there'll be just a tiny, probably about an 1/8 inch away of a free area that's perfect for you to sew around. So you don't have to sew in the loops or the hooks. You can just sew on that tape and just have an easier time stitching around. I am definitely making a few changes in this pattern. For example, we're going to be making tubes. The pattern suggests you sew on a piece of string at one end so you can pull to turn the tube right sides out, since we're sewing them right sides together. I tried and tried and tried to pull out the tube using that string method. It was not working for me, so I just said, you know what, I'm doing it a way I know it'll work, so that's the way I'm going with. So I'm not showing the string method in this video, but if you like to use the string method, do it that way. Or if you have another way you prefer to turn a tube right sides out, do that. Everybody has to do what's best for them in the sewing room. One other thing I'm going to do differently is that on my version here, and maybe I just missed this step, but it has this raw edge here showing with the exterior. It's not a big deal because it's not going to really fray that much. It's not that noticeable. So I'm going to attempt to turn this under so that it is a finished edge here. You could also just add a little bit of another fabric, like how we do with zipper tape, a zipper end, vinyl, or a 4-way fold piece of fabric, or binding tape, something like that. So I'm going to attempt to do that. I didn't do it on this one because honestly, I didn't know if that raw edge was going to be finished, and I might have missed it in the pattern. It might have told me how to finish it, but I didn't see it. So now that we've talked about the things I'm doing differently, let's go ahead and start sewing this. I think you're going to be really surprised at how quick this comes together, and this would be great for craft shows. We know that there are several water bottle holder patterns on the market, but some of them are very advanced and take a long time to cut, interface, and sew. This one does not. You have 2 pattern pieces, you cut those out, you have 1 cut and measure, and then your strap. It's really that simple. So let's go ahead and start sewing up this pattern. I'm going to be sewing on this Velcro tape on both the exterior and the lining first. In the pattern, you actually do this at the end, but because I have black Velcro, I want to use black thread. I'm not using black thread for the rest of the pattern. I'll be using white thread. So I want to go ahead and get this step out of the way, so I can go ahead and switch to my white thread and not have to switch back anymore. I'm going to go ahead and sew about 1/8 to 1/16 of an inch away from this Velcro all around the 4 edges. I'm going to backstitch, but really I'm going to be trying to sew just right on that area that doesn't have any hooks or loops. Now that we have the Velcro sewn onto the wraps, we're going to go ahead and finish it up the rest of the way. Have your batting or your fleece right sides up. Pull out the lining piece. For me, they're all the same, so it doesn't really matter, but your lining piece should have the hook Velcro on it. You're going to place it on top of the batting, matching everything up, and it's going to be right sides up. I'm just smoothing it down. Then take your exterior piece out. It should be the one with the loop Velcro on it. But what you're going to do is you're going to take this exterior piece, you're going to place it right sides down, but you're going to make sure that the Velcro is on the opposite end. So I will be laying it down like this, right sides together, and we're just making a little sandwich now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew around here. The designer tells us to leave an opening here at the edge, but since my Velcro is there, I didn't really want to do that, so I left my opening here on the side. Let's go ahead and sew around with the seam allowance given in the pattern. The seam allowance is announced at the very beginning of the pattern, so you'll find it there. It does not change, and you will sew leaving an opening about 2 to 3 inches here so that you can turn this out easily. Now that I have these pieces sewn together, what we'll do is we'll trim up our corners definitely by taking like a diagonal piece off and then trim up any overhang. Do not trim up anything at the opening. Once you have everything trimmed up, go ahead and open it up, and you're going to open it up so that you're looking at both of your prints. You could, if your interfacing is not attached, do it this way and see it this, but this would be wrong. You can see how that is wrong sides. We want to open it up so that we're looking at the right sides of both of our fabrics. This is where we're going to turn. So we'll start just pushing that out, and we'll take some time to poke out all the corners to make sure everything looks nicely before we go on to our next step. Once I have everything turned out, I'm going to go ahead and use my fingers to close up this opening by pushing in the raw edges of the material and then adding some clips. I'm going to go around the rest of the perimeter of the bag, adding clips and rolling the seams. You could definitely take this over to the iron. If your material is not wanting to lay flat or it's not rolling the seams out easily, you want to make for sure this looks nice before we start top stitching it. Now that I have everything clipped and looking the way I want it to, I'm going to top stitch all around here with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. You'll have to be careful here at the top with the Velcro just to make for sure you're not sewing over it with the contrasting thread, because that wouldn't look good, or at least it wouldn't in my opinion. You'll sew around this edge to close up that opening. So we'll sew all the way around here, and then I'm going to do a line of stitching all the way down the middle. That's just a separating line. I don't know if it's necessary here, but I do think it looks good in the end of the bag, and it kind of holds that batting or the fleece in place, so it's not going to be crumpling or wrinkling. So I do think it's a good way to have that row of stitching through the middle. So I have this top stitch and I have that center line sewn down the middle. At this point, we're going to set this piece aside, trim up any threads you have, of course, but we won't need to use it until at the very end. Now we're going to sew the sling outer and the sling liner. If you remember, the sling outer is larger than the sling lining. I'm doing mine differently than the pattern suggests, so you can follow the pattern for sure. If you want to use the string to turn this, you would need to add the string first and then follow the pattern for those instructions. The way I have them set up right now is I have the 2 interfaced outer pieces clipped right sides together. We'll sew along this edge. I have the 2 uninterfaced outer pieces clipped together. We'll sew at that same edge at the bottom. The same thing for the lining pieces. We clip together to the 2 interfaced pieces, and then we clip together the 2 uninterfaced pieces. I'm going to sew each one of these with that seam allowance given in the pattern all along that bottom edge, making sure I backstitch when I start and stop. Once I have all these sewn together, I need to open this up and press those seams flat. But before I do that, I'm going to take off a little bit of the bulk here on this edge, because when I was sewing this together on my domestic, I was having a little bit of a bump. My domestic machine could go over it, but it did just create a bump. So the way I'm going to take off that extra at the seam is I'm just going to kind of diagonally go in, definitely not cutting out this on any of the stitches, but you can see I'm just taking some of it off. That's just going to reduce it a little bit. I don't worry about it in the middle because my needle's not going to have to go over that part. It's just going to have to go over the side seams. Now that I have that cut, I will do that same thing on the other ones. I'm going to take this over to the iron and I'm going to press it flat. I'm actually going to pull out my glue stick to glue this down so this seam stays flat. You can see the seam right here. We want it to look nice and flat, so let's trim up these seams and then go to the iron and iron these flat. I'll come back to show you the next step. Now we're going to work on adding these 2 pieces together. We'll add the 2 lining pieces to each other. We'll add the 2 exterior pieces to themselves. So you can see this is what my seams look like after I've trimmed off the edge and I use that glue stick to flatten them down. They're really nice and flat. So what I'll do is I'll put these together and I'll match up the seams first, add a clip there, and then match everything else up. So now I have the outer sling pieces clipped right sides together. I have the lining sling pieces clipped right sides together. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew them together. The pattern tells us to leave the opening here at the top and at the bottom. The pattern will have the string for you to pull it through. For the lining, you're going to pull it through from the bottom, but from the exterior, you would pull it through from the center. Since that didn't work for me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave an opening on the side. I'm going to leave it kind of close to the middle if I can, so that way even this bottom part doesn't have too far to turn. So that after we sew it together, we can turn this piece and the outer piece right sides out through the opening here. I'm going to sew down each of these sides, leaving my opening with the seam allowance given in the pattern. We are not sewing across this short little bottom or top areas. Now that we have these pieces sewn together, I'm going to take off a little bit of that bulk there at the top and the bottom. Just cutting diagonally there. I also want to take the time to remove a little bit more bulk here at this center seam area. So I'm just kind of hollowing it out so that there's not as much there when I turn it. It's not just gathering there in that area. I do have my opening here. I don't want to reduce any bulk in that opening. I want to leave that opening uncut. So now what I can do is I can open up and turn this piece right sides out. The first thing I do is I kind of get a little pocket there, and then I'll use my hemostats to try to grab it the rest of the way and pull it. Once you get these pulled out, you're going to have to take some time to get the seams rolled flat, and then also if you do yours like mine, you'll have to make for sure you get that opening shut, and so that everything is even. You want to make for sure it's not noticeable from where the opening is. So I'll take the time to do that, clipping as I go. I will definitely take this over to the iron. Not only am I going to iron this flat and have all the seams looking nice, but I'm going to use that glue stick again to kind of adhere this opening closed temporarily, so that whenever I'm sewing it closed, I don't have any slipping or anything like that, because this will be noticed if it's off at the end of this project. Here's how the outer looks. Let's do the same thing for the lining and then go and press everything and have them ironed flat. So here is my outer, here is the lining. You can see I have them pressed flat. I did say that I was going to turn the ends under on the outer, but honestly they look really good. I'm just going to let them be. It's not that big of a deal, but that might be something you may want to do. But I'm leaving mine not turned in, but I do have the opening from where I turned these right sides out. I have it ironed flat, but I put a little bit of that glue stick there to kind of secure it in place. So everything looks good. The next step is to do some top stitching. You're going to have to pull out your pattern piece. You'll line the pattern piece up here at the top and then make a mark to where that stitch line is. What we're going to do is we're going to top stitch down on both sides to that stitch line. This section in the middle will be unstitched. We'll do the same thing on this side. On each side, we'll top stitch down to that stitch line. We'll do the same thing for our lining. On both the lining and the exterior, there will be a spot in the middle where there is no top stitching. So let's go ahead and get that top stitching done, and we're almost done with our adjustable water bottle. For the top stitching, I'm just doing 1/8 of an inch away on all of the sides. Now what you're going to do is you're going to put these pieces together. You're going to match up the seams on these two pieces. The lining, of course, will be shorter than the outer. So for mine, where they're all the same, it doesn't really matter which side I put together, but I'm just going to start by matching up that seam, and I will be centering these pieces on top of each other. Here's how they look clipped on top of each other. Now what you're going to do is you're going to sew these two pieces together. We're going to sew these two pieces together where that top stitching that we just did ends. So it'll be basically a little box here to attach these pieces together. If on your exterior you are not able to close your opening with the previous row of top stitching or catching it with this top stitching, you will want to probably tack that down. So check your exterior opening. Your lining opening will be closed. If you put your opening close to the center, there's a chance that you'll just need to tack that opening down to make for sure it doesn't come open or fray from extended use. So what I want to do is I'm going to put my foot down exactly where those previous row of top stitching ends. I'll start sewing here and I'll back stitch. Coming along this bump here in the center, that is the area where I said there was a little bit of bulk there. And so I did trim most of mine down so I don't have a problem, but just be mindful and go slow or use a hump jumper if necessary. Once you get to this previous row of stitches here on the lining, go ahead and pivot and come across. It should match up perfectly on the other side. And then pivot again and sew back down to the other row of top stitching. Go over one more time and that should complete that box. I'm just checking to make sure my opening on my exterior got closed. I had just a small spot that didn't, so I'm just going to tack it down. It won't be more than 2 stitches, really. You could even do it with hand stitching and ladder stitch if you wanted to. It's not a big deal. Now that I have all that stitching done, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out the D-rings. On your outer pattern piece, there's a fold line. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my D-ring there right where that lining ends and just fold it down so that the D-ring is sitting right above that lining. And I'm just going to stitch across here to secure this piece. You could add a rivet here if you wanted to, however you wanted to do it. This is another area where you have a little bit of bulk. So go slow and make sure your machine can handle the level of bulk here. It is going through several layers. Let's do the same thing for the other side and make sure you're holding down that lining so it's staying flat and smooth and it's not going to leave a bump. Slide on your D-ring just to the top of that lining and then fold over the outer, adjusting as necessary, and then sew across. So now we have these pieces ready. At this point, I still didn't know what I was doing. I'm like, how is this coming together? It's so simple, but sometimes we just don't understand things. You simply slide it through. That's all you're doing. You're sliding it through. Bring up this other side, slide it through the other way. You can go ahead and put the opening, I go ahead and close it so it's a little bit easier to manage. Slide in a water bottle, adjust everything. And there you have it. Is this not the cutest water bottle you have ever seen? I feel like it's really functional. I feel like it's very easy to make, so you could batch sew a lot of these instead of some of the more complicated water bottle holders. Make a simple strap with webbing, you're good to go. This would even be something that you could use for baby bottles, whatever you need to carry. Where it's adjustable, you can have it to fit several different sizes. It's rare that patterns really surprise me as much as this one did, but this one I felt was really unique in how it comes together and very user-friendly once you understand it. When you're not using it as a drink holder, of course, it's going to be very compact. So you could pack these in your suitcase if you're going on a trip and not have to worry about it taking up a lot of room. Easy to make these for the entire family. Great to make them for school trips for kids. What a cute thing to do. I feel like this is a great pattern. Highly suggest it. I'm going to have the link for how to get this pattern in my description. I also like her other patterns too. I have a feeling I'll be sewing more of her patterns on my channel just because I felt like they all looked unique and practical, something that I can use, and designs that I hadn't seen in other places. Really like her design. She has a very creative brain. So thank you so much to the designer for letting me film this tutorial and letting me sew up this pattern. My prints are from J&R Edwards. I'll have the link for that in my description as well. Thank you for watching another tutorial of mine. Thank you for going on this journey with me. I really appreciate everyone, and I hope you have a wonderful day.